So Jonathan behind the wheel, keeping us safe on the very busy Maltese roads, and Vera just joined us. She is our licensed guide. So, you're all here because of Game of Thrones. Know my wife from this scene. In his defense, he must have been the only person on set not to know that Lisa was my wife. Now, again, when he came to Malta, he was on his third divorce, so he was kind of on a rebound. And right after I take this photo, he turns around over to Lisa and goes, "So what you doing tonight?" I will never forget Lisa's reply. She looks at him and tells him, "I'm going back home with him," pointing to me. Now, I always imagined, what if I wasn't there that day? Informed that his longtime friend and ally, Robert Bretton the King, got injured in the hunting incident, okay? So that's the other side of that gate. And news is this is brought to him by two other members of the small council. And these are Aidan Gillen, who plays Peter Baelish, and Conrad Hill, who plays Lord Varys. Thankfully, both these actors are so much nicer in real life than the characters they portray. Aidan Gillen is a lovely chap. He travelled to Malta with his wife, son and daughter, and used to bring them to set almost every day, except for the brothel scenes, of course. And it was so great to have a father figure on set. That's normally so rare. Conrad Hill, on the other hand, Lord Varys, is so different. First and foremost, I assure you all, he's not a eunuch in real life. Also, he doesn't have a soft voice, used to be a stand-up comedian, and guess what? He's not bald. He's contractually bound to shave his hair for his scenes. So in between seasons, and when he's done, he lets his hair grow, sports facial hair, and that's how the man looks. Very different, as you can see. Okay? I was both humbled and honored to have worked with them whilst the show was in its infancy, before they became so. From here keeps being heard all the way to season 4, beyond which then they use somewhere else. But the visuals are here in the first season. But more than the actual belfry, the more important part here is the song. Because that's the exact spot where Ned Stark challenges Cersei about her incest with her brother Jaime and true parentage of their children Tom and Joffrey and Myrcella. This was the slip of the tongue that led to his untimely beheading. We always say, if this scene didn't happen, Ned Stark might still be alive. Again, here, note the simplicity in dressing it up. We just put a hedge in front of the statue of the Madonna. You can still see the shrine tattooed above the hedge, some stone on the ground, and the only prop we got on the day was a stone bench on the right-hand side for Ned Stark to sit on. This scene will always be remembered for Cersei's reply, which becomes a very famous quote. It's where she tells Ned Stark, "When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground." I remind you, this was the only time the term Game of Thrones was used, and therefore it deserved its own special attention. In fact, the whole episode was called You Win or You Die, and they went to take what is known as a silhouette shot, meaning Cersei against the light. If I had to stay really into the light, you wouldn't see my features so well, but my outline. It's used to dramatize at times, and this was the shot they were after. Problem with this was that albeit Lena Headey is a tall girl, however, she wasn't tall enough to get this angle. So this is my photo of what they did on the day. They stuck her up on what are known as apple boxes. These are wooden boxes which are used by the grips department in connection with camera work, typically to carry the wedges used to align the tracks of the dollies. They're often used as stools, so he's sitting on one, but they come very handy as podiums to bring actors up to height. So now you know how you get to see Tom Cruise in front of the camera. They will have platforms for him to walk on. And that's actually, though it's funny, but it's actually true for a number of productions. Then in the Vito, certain shortish actors, the difference in headroom between them and their taller counterparts is too much for the camera, so they have to elevate. It's easier to put it nice under because it's the one place where people tend to wander off and actually get lost, okay? So just always, I won't go fast, but keep in your sight. Game of Thrones here used it extensively, and this is the gate which was used as King's Gate, the main entrance to King's Landing, which you can see best in the third episode of season 1, Lord Snow, for the arrival of Catelyn Stark and Roderick Castle to the city. Here you will note a number of mistakes because the local council here was very willing to allow them to film for 2 weeks, for 10 days, but less so to lock off the entire city. They said, film here, but you can only block off a street or a square in one day, because obviously it's a main touristic site and they wanted access to the tourists as well. As a result, within each 24-hour window, they had to set it up, film it and wrap it off. No time for any major intervention. And that's why there are these mistakes. The flagpoles are left in shot. the bollards. These are car bollards, so that they don't allow the cars to come in. They just put rope around them. But it's so obvious now that you know that these would have never existed at the time before cars were invented. Okay? And then, from a fan point of view, the biggest mistake, as Catelyn Stark and Rodriguez are riding in, you see the lion on the column. That is the sigil of the Grandmaster who built the gate, because the gate used to be over there, see? But when the knights were granted that palace, they enlarged it and it enrosed on the gate, so they closed it, that was a drawbridge, and the Grandmaster built a newer gate with a stone bridge, and then decorated it with this coat of arms, which includes the lion. And when we pointed this out to the set designer, the obvious reply was, okay, yes, we know, but kind of we don't have the budget to alter it. But in any case, the Lannisters are home. We were gonna leave it there because Lannisters is the lion, is their sigil. But I remind you, this is in the beginning of season 1, where the Baratheons were in power, and it would have been the stag, never the lion. So that's, again, from a fan point of view, a rather big mistake. Okay? And here you can see them as they're crossing over the bridge, and the camera is filming them from left to right. Let's go in, let's explore. Or what wasn't part of the era, which edit was unnecessarily, because they could have retained the original side ending. This took us to the best part of the afternoon. After the scene, we broke up for lunch, and we came later wanting the light to change to an early evening shot. And this was the last day. And this was the time where we had the conspiracy scene, where Ned Stark sends out his wife Catelyn on a mission to rally in her sister and the Knights of the Vale. Here, both actors are standing under that plaque, which was, however, considered to be a bit too modern. So both the plaque and the pipework, as you can see, were camouflaged in vines. They even extended the vines to hide that small floodlight on the arch to avoid having to remove it. It was all done so very much intelligently. They removed the lantern up top. Roderick Cassel is standing in the mouth of the gate. Critics picked up on the fact that they left the coat of arms and the insignia unshot, because they said these date from the Knights roughly 350 years later than the era in which Game of Thrones is supposedly set. How many of us knew that, you know? So they were a bit too picky. Then we go on reverse. When the camera is pointing this way towards Ned Stark and Jory, we have behind them those three shots. And the set designers, knowing they were here only for 24 hours, they said, we don't want to spend much money or effort to redress it. So they cheated, like what they did in the monastery with the hedge. Here, they put a long stall right in front of the three shops. You can still see the tops of the shops protrude. There's the bracket holding the Vina Glass sign, and there's the bracket holding the lantern. If you look in the corner there, there's a street sign and there's an arrow. You can still see them very clearly over here. They're just painted in watercolors, okay? So if you go back home and you watch season 1, if you look at the background as opposed to the foreground, you will see all sorts of things, doorbells, letterbox, street signs, all painted over. They're there, but you wouldn't have noticed them the first time around. And this is the part where Ned Stark and Catelyn hug and kiss each other for the very last time before his premature beheading. Okay, they're standing right over here, so it was also a very important scene. Let's go around, let's explore. Made 14 years ago because they became too dangerous for people to walk over there. At least they left this stretch as a memory of how they used to be. Now you can imagine with such a pretty backdrop, lots of filming would have taken place over here, and we welcome such big names as Sir Roger Moore, Sir Michael Caine, Sean Connery, many others, you know. Simon Templar, The Saint, as well as Vendetta for The Saint as well. Those were both filmed over here, and these are just amongst the long list of productions we filmed here. The one where this location is most remembered for is for The Count of Monte Cristo. In 2002, 70% of that movie was filmed in Malta with Guy Pearce and Jim Caviezel. This was Venice. This was the Venetian carnival scene where the Count gets apprehended. past 5 years and why so many film productions keep coming here. Because notwithstanding its small size, there's so much to do, it's so diverse, and basically it can fit a lot of fun. Okay? And this is a good place to admire what it has to offer. Ways which we refer to as being called the maze. In Game of Thrones, these next set of streets were used as coppersmith's wine. Okay, we go down. And then earlier last year we had Seacode with Sam Worthington, the guy from Avatar, who was actually walking. Women used to man the rooftops and the bastions, and supposedly if any armies tried to infiltrate, typically at night, you would get lost wandering these streets in a cul-de-sac. Maltese women used to be brewing hot oil or any hot substance in these massive cauldrons and tip it over these invaders. Someone throws a lit torch and burns them alive. I say it's a legend because since Indina was never breached and is present built, as a result there is no hardcore evidence of it actually happening, but historians lean towards it as being more likely a probability as opposed to just a possibility. Here we are descending towards the medieval part, so you can see the trapdoors that lead down to the Roman city, and this is where we cross the imaginary line that takes us back to 100 years from now. We are back to a Game of Thrones location, and this is the Street of Steel, where I told you earlier that Peter Baelish sends Ned Stark to meet his fate. It's where he meets Gendry for the first time. To give an idea of how it was dressed, if you look up that street, you can see there's a cement patch on the right-hand side, there on the wall, over the guardrail, and at the top you can just about see a large pregnant window. That's how you see it now. This is how you see it when it was dressed for Game of Thrones. They added two things mainly: the tarps to create shade and color, and the soil on the ground. They used a reddish soil, they reflected the light on the soil to create a red hue on the walls. So that's to create a sharp contrast to the honey color of our limestone. Okay? So again, to show it's like a different location, but it's still the same place. Here, all this effort was just for a 4-second shot. You can time it if you really watch it, of Ned Stark coming down the hill together with Jory both on the walls. Ned Stark gets off, Jory stays at top, and then we cut inside the rooms. These rooms were dressed up as blacksmiths. In there we'll meet Tobomot, the blacksmith who introduces us to Joe Dempsey, the actor who plays Gendry. And this is where Ned Stark thinks has it all figured out that Gendry is Robert Baratheon's best friend son. The horse will go to that way, don't worry, so we'll just keep going straight. Okay. So here, this obviously one leads to assume that in the George R.R. Martin version of things, Gendry was meant to be. You can still see the blackened sill, the column, the oval with the wooden bars, and the trellis. We're just missing the ladies. This was the sleaze bar in the corner. It's just that garage door open. We slung a little tent, couple of tables and chairs, and he's a Maltese actor chatting up a working lady by the door. Ned Stark arrives, Peter Baelish goes out to greet him, and the one thing they did not like here was the door. Because you'll agree it does not befit the era, so they replaced it with a more medieval looking door. Nonetheless, you can still see there's a number 8 on the side. It's still visible here, though they put paint on it. If you watch this scene back home, you can still make out the number 8 faintly under the paint. This is the part where Ned Stark almost chokes Peter Baelish on learning that he was keeping his wife inside a brothel, which for a lord was highly offensive. Then they all enter, so that eventually they all exit with Jory to find the Lannister army approaching. This is where the camera shifts up this way, and this is where the whole square comes to life. And the first thing you will note here is that a lot of soil was placed on the ground. Soil had 3 functions over here. It was meant to hide the flagstones, it was meant to level the sharp incline and cover the crash mats, because they were going to stage a very important sword fight over here. Other than that, it's all the same. You can see the garage door, the window, the well, the tree, the 2 green windows and the color-coded walls. Jaime gets off, challenges Ned Stark to a fight, revealing the street sign. So now you know the street sign is still there, and it's so obvious it's made of clay. Okay, it looks even though it's covered that it's a street sign. And then in the fight that follows, the first character to die is Jory Cassel, the son of Roderick Cassel, the right-hand guy of Ned Stark here at King's Landing. And the next photos, which I took myself, reveal
that in fact he didn't die, he wasn't even injured, they used prosthetics. These are the same type of tricks they use in makeup as they do for burns, like the face of the hound. It's just dried silicone, layers and layers of dried silicone with paint, which as you can see is so light, it sticks to an eye patch and can adhere to one's eyelids. When the camera is on reverse, looking this way, this wall was hardly pressed at all. Therefore, you can still see here the balcony, the two louvered windows and the chimney, and that is number 20, the door with the black knockers open on one leaf. Jamie is on that grate, that's the angle, so number 22 behind him is what is covered with a stall. They left the top stone visible, whilst the letterbox they just covered with a sack had been placed by some twigs. Notwithstanding the primitive way they dressed up this background, it was used extensively. Most of Prince Charming's lines were said over here, and I'm standing pretty much where Ned Stark gets nabbed with the lance. It was actually instead of the bonnet of this car. This is something that wasn't planned and actually infuriates Jamie, who wanted a fair fight, okay? So he strikes down the Lannister guards who did that, and then gives Ned Stark an ultimatum to tell his wife Catelyn to return to his brother. As he gets on the horse and is about to leave, the shot widens and it reveals that white pregnant window. And as I was telling you, the way they dressed it up, they put a clotheslines with clothes on it. That is the trick that they've been using. So it is something which is even used today. It's so much cheaper than using CGI. This lower slide is a screenshot of the fight between Ned Stark and Jamie. He's from Sheffield and he's an experienced swordsman. He's from Denmark, didn't know how to hold a sword when he came here for Game of Thrones. But he was the Kingslayer. So not willing to take their chances, HBO employed the services of one of the world's top stuntmen and sword fighters, a British guy called Buster Reeves. And they dressed up Buster in Wick's costume and all to make him look like Jamie. These are my behind the scenes shots. I'm moving around to keep the same background. This one I took myself of the rehearsal of the choreography of the fight between Sean Bean and Buster Reeves, who's dressed up to make him look like Jamie. Whilst the real Jamie is actually sitting pretty watching them two rehearse. And that's the fourth wall, the wall that doesn't appear in shot. That's why there's a black tent over there. That's Video Village, where the director is sitting in front of his monitors on the collapsible chairs. They use black to keep the glare off his screens, which brings me to another issue. The same issue I started and I mentioned earlier on, lighting. Here you can see the shadows. Rotation of the earth is such that shadow earlier in the day was over there. By the time we would exit lunch, had to walk here again, that would be up halfway to that building. A scene like this is filmed over the day from different angles. If the shadows don't add up, there can be no continuity. So the DOP, Director of Photography, has a right-hand guy whom we call the gaffer, whose job is to create optimum lighting conditions. What he does over here, he brings in a crane, creates shade, and the broad daylight they use HMIs, massive floodlights that go up to 24,000 watts and recreate the light. The result, no shadows, but the faces are well lit, so they don't have any continuity issues. My behind the scenes for this shot, taken 10 steps back, you can see now beyond the remit of your TV sets. You can see shade, reflection, sound, the boom lady, the apple box on standby, and all the doubles and crew. And at the other end, Aidan Gillen was really struggling with the Maltese heat and humidity and removing layers of clothing between his takes. Talking about layers, I told you how earlier also I had to wear an additional layer of double-layered green tarp to hide my stunt armor. What I did not tell you, I left Game of Thrones for a week to work as a stunt and an actor on another production, a French movie called The Fisherman. And I was an Israeli soldier, and they shaved me from head to toe for that role. So when I came back to Game of Thrones, that's how they made me look. Very, very different, as you can see. But note the tarps, okay, these are to hide the stunt armor. I have armor here, behind my back, here, and over here as well. Perfect timing to break you up for lunch. The Cliffs of Ohor in Game of Thrones Season 1. It's where we first see Daenerys leading her Khalasar, and also where HBO manages to fool its viewers that there were 40,000 Dothrakis in her horde, in her army. In reality, we were only 40. That's as many people that were part of the special ability team, and that's as many horses that we could source to come down here. And how did they manage to pull it off? Thanks to very clever camera techniques. So by that stone over there, there was a camera on a tripod facing me. Along this path, right towards us, 15 Dothraki on horseback, led by the Gypsy collectors in this scene, Khal Drogo, Daenerys, and Otto, the Blood Rider. Up on the cliff, riding from right to left, 25 Dothrakis on horseback, I was one of them, and about 6 to 8 Dothrakis on foot just as fillers. This is what you see on the day. So the top slide serves to understand why they chose this particular location. They used the blue of the sea as a natural blue screen and converted it to be sand and mountains. So if you are trying to figure out where in the world the red waste is, you are looking at it. It is the Mediterranean Sea. Wow. See how clever? And it costed almost no money. Then the camera pans into position and it's a locked frame. So we mark the edge of set at either end at the top with a short red and white pole stuck in the ground. So we know once we're past this pole, we're in shot. Once we're past this pole, we're out of shot. So as these are coming in slowly at a tangent, up top we're going round faster. As soon as this guy exits the shot, he will trot the way around out of camera angle and go back in. So again, you think there's a never-ending line, but there's no connection between these two sets, and that's the same guy who left this shot 30 seconds earlier. And like the Cersei shot at the monastery, it's a silhouette shot, it's against the light. You can't make out faces, and therefore they could rotate us for as much as they wanted to. Now, this followed the scene where the Dothrakis had just raided the village of Lazar. That's where they killed all the landmen to be able to steal their gold to buy the ships to cross the narrow sea, as was the promise of Khal Drogo to Daenerys. Also, however, they raped the women as spoils of war, which upsets Daenerys. So, through Ser Jorah, she liberates them all, including the village witch, Mir Maz-Dur. This leads to a fight between Khal Drogo and Mago, the other blood rider. You may recall that fight, that's where Khal Drogo rips out Mago's throat, but he gets wounded on his chest. Mir Maz-Dur, this liberated witch pretending to be nice to him, offers to heal the wound but intentionally poisons him. This is where the wound festers, where the poison kicks in. So we move the camera from over there to where that stone hut is facing us. These stone huts, by the way, dotting the countryside, these are hunting lodges. It's where Maltese hunters hide to shoot at migrating birds. It's a less glamorous aspect of our culture. There's a dip in the ground behind you. Can you see it there? We stuck a large mattress over there, and that's where Aquaman, Jason Momoa, takes his fall off his horse. Okay? When he's on the ground, this becomes the beginning of the end of his reign. And why is that? Dothrakis are nomad people, so they're only as good as their riding skills. And as their Khal, as their leader, he has to be the better rider. So he's useless on the ground and says only one line: "No, I must ride." On this, Otto, the second in command, starts vying for his position and starts inciting the Dothrakis against him, saying a Khal who cannot ride is no Khal. Daenerys, as his wife, tries to excuse him, saying he's tired, he needs to rest. But he immediately shoots her down when he tells her he fell off his horse, like he's doomed, he's dusted. After lots of towing and throwing, he gives her the damning line when he tells her, "You do not command me, Khaleesi." So now we know as the viewers, and she knows as the character, that once Khal Drogo dies, she will no longer be leading the Khalasar. And that's where she decides what she executes 5 seasons later, in the 3rd episode of season 6, Burn Them All. And this will be the only other time she walks into the fire. Following this scene, I'm gonna take you over there. So raised fire, so Khal Drogo's body is somewhere up here. Before she does the ritual of entering with the 3 dragon eggs and coming out on Scatter's next day with the 3 dragons, she first starts the scene by addressing her reduced Khalasar. Her few remaining loyal Dothrakis, me included, meet in the wet soil between the bush and the edge of the cliff. Bear in mind, these were the 2 night scenes. It was very dark, cold, windy. Scenes are just as dark. So we start off with Daenerys standing with her back to the people facing the fire, and then she turns round to address the crowd. As she's addressing us, she says 2 very important things. She says that she will burn anyone who causes us any harm, but more importantly, she addresses us as free men, meaning we're not compelled to stay. On this, the director decides to dramatize, and he picks 7 of us and asks them to leave. Once that happens, Daenerys turns her attention to Ser Jorah, and she asks him to lead Mir Maz-Dur, the witch, to the fire. Ian Glenn, okay, leads Mia, the actress who plays Mir Maz-Dur, right where you're standing, brilliant, okay, but heels in, facing out. We wrapped her body in the same fire retardant gel we normally use on Formula 1 drivers. Reason being, they would have lit the fire around her, shoot through the flames, and it gives you the false impression she's getting actually engulfed in them. Which worked fine during the rehearsal when it wasn't so windy, but on the day, gusting force 9 winds didn't work at all. She got very obnoxious from the heat, and we had to replace her. And we removed her, and instead of her, we put a mannequin that looked like her, was dressed like her, and covered in a special wax which ignites instantly. The only problem was that up till this point in time, all the scripted scenes were still facing the fire. So we needed a breakout scene to change the angle away from the fire. And that's why they introduced this scene the scene where Sir Jorah tries to convince Daenerys not to walk into the flames. The reverse angle points away from the fire, giving moment and opportunity to redress the set. Once that is done, when the camera is looking back this way towards the fire, you can see she's just a burning image. Now both actors are standing well outside the mandatory 4-meter minimum safety distance you keep from real flames. But because the wind is fanning the flames so much, they were still getting scorched and still needed the same fire retardant gel all over their faces, arms and legs. What was really ironic here is that these actors are standing somewhere over here, getting burned. We Dothrakis were just 10 meters behind them, freezing our asses off. 10 meters made a heck of a difference because of the heat generated by the fire, which you can appreciate its magnitude to these two shots. Also here you will note that notwithstanding all the trouble it caused the previous week in Gozo, they still insisted on bringing a lot of soil on the ground. And you might ask, why on earth would they bother? This looks pretty good enough. There's a reason, and that is that the only controllable fire used on film set is gas. Meaning that what you're looking at here are two large circular gas lines. It's like a big gas hub, and they were fueled by 4 feeder lines that crossed the set in full view to the valley where there were 15 large LPG tanks. So they had to get 3 large lorries laden with soil to cover not just the feeder lines, but cover this whole place for this aerial shot. Next morning at the break of dawn, we are on reverse. Camera is looking this way now. You can see how the cliff was dressed up, and you can see me waking up as a Dothraki, okay? I'll show you a better photo of me in a minute. And we get to see Daenerys in all her glory. I'm gonna show you the exact spot where she's kneeling, because I know secretly some guys may wish to kiss the ground. Okay, so this is where these very 2 famous posters, okay, were pulled off. And this is actually Emilia Clarke standing on the same spot. You can still see the same shrubs behind me as you can see behind her at the time. This is Emilia Clarke, no doubles were used, and as I said, no dragons were used. So how did they create the dragons? They used electrical tape. That's what electricians use to fix cabling. But the way they did it is this. Electrical tape comes in different colors, as did the 3 dragons, which you may recall were red, green and a golden yellow. What many people didn't realize, when the dragons were born, their underwings retained the same color. So Drogon, the big dragon, the one Daenerys rides, had red underwings, Viserion yellow, Rhaegal green. So using this color tape, they marked her body with a series of red, green and yellow crosses, and in post-production, each set of crosses becomes a video of that particular dragon. And that's why in this scene only, the dragons never cross each other's path. It would glitch otherwise. It is a layered shot. Here you get to see a better shot of me as a Dothraki. Okay, I told you about all the makeup we used to have. Now, this is the only character where our body is exposed. So it requires makeup on our body as well. I have tattoos, he has more tattoos than I have. And again, we needed this concealing makeup, which basically could withstand the rain and everything. That meant a long time in the chair before we get started, and then some time to be cleansed. The white you see is actually our skin. That's the one bit where the armor has moved, which hadn't had makeup applied to it. All of this is where my tattoo is, completely camouflaged. This is all concealing makeup. So just to appreciate, there was a lot of effort done to try and get us as much in character as possible. Now I told you how the sea was actually used as a natural blue screen. So where that car is parked, I took a photo from there to the cliff where they were rehearsing the part where they find Khal Drogo in a vegetative state. And that is the top slide, okay? You can see the sea and all. The bottom slide is what eventually you get to see on your TV sets. See how it all changed? Wherever the blue of the sea appears, it's now sand and mountains. And that is the beauty of technology on a budget, but it still works very well. Today, obviously, money is no longer an issue, but at the time when this was shot, they had no guarantees at all it was going to be such a hit. So the local council here was very willing to allow them to film for 2 weeks, for 10 days.